Go back here, check everything pretty much, all the bushings, all suspension components. Check for any kind of wear. A good sign of wear on struts would be oil leakage around the strut housing. Look for broken springs, anything out of order. You definitely want to check brake hoses for any signs of cracking, dry rotting, or anything like that. A lot of the cars we see have stainless steel on them, so they're pretty much indestructible. You want to check for exhaust rubbing, exhaust hanging low, anything like that that's going to cause obstruction. Any kind of excessive leaking back here in the transmission. Okay, this one's got a little bit of a seat coming around this axle seal right here. You can see it's not bad. Not anything to be concerned about on the track or anything. It's something that would want to be addressed in the future. And you know, a tech inspection is a good time to look over the car very well. And, you know, see any other kind of maintenance items that might need to be addressed. Too much going on, but you want to look all the brake lines, all the steel brake lines, look for any kinks, anything like that. Any loose bolts, missing half shafts, exactly. Look for torn boots, excessive play.
One thing I want to point out, on 928, it's the only one that has this. As you all know, or you ought to know, the battery's right here. So how does the positive terminal of that battery get to the starter and to the alternator? Here's the line right here. This baby's live all the time. Okay, that's a positive line right next to a grounded car. Check this line carefully. Make sure it's not cracked. Someone hasn't put a jack here and tried to lift the car and pinched it. Another reason not to do it. Okay? So you check that line to make sure it's fine. If you see a fray on here, if you start to see the copper line that's in there, you got to replace that. That's not a cheap replacement. It's not an easy one either, but it's got to be replaced because we're talking about potential fire damage here. That's you know, that alternator puts out 100 amps. I wouldn't want to be sitting up there when that thing goes. Yeah, you're right in the hot seat.
Okay, move up to the front. The 928's engine mounts are pretty important. I have a fail-safe way of checking them. I stick my hand up under here, and it's basically just feel. Okay. No, this one's not too bad. They're a little worn, but if my hand barely can fit in there, the engine's almost sitting on this subframe right here. Okay.
So you're just looking for the space between.
I'm looking at the space, and that pretty much tells you how sunk the motor mount's in. You can visually inspect them, looking for cracks, dry rot, and stuff like that. Okay. But
The way I do it, he's got his way to put his hand there. The way I do it is I look to see how much gap there is between the bracket that is a safety. Should the motor mounts ever fail completely, these are safety brackets so that the engine doesn't rock right out of its stand. All right, and there's a gap between the safety itself and a counterpart that is attached at the bottom of the motor mount. If you cannot fit your finger through there, or if you can at least use only your pinky, you're okay. If you can use a larger finger than your pinky, chances are you've got too much gap. They've sagged beyond the point of where you should have them.
What's that car showing right now?
Less than a pinky. I think you're fine. I think you're great. At least on this one, I can't tell on that one. I'll have to go on. Yeah, over here. Over here on this one.
The other unique way of looking
This one's a little bit wider. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, the other unique way of looking at motor mounts, the one thing I found, I replaced them on my car. My mounts had totally collapsed. I mean, the car was rough.
That's that donut shape?
Yeah, it's donut. I think in '83 is about when he went to the hydraulic mounts, or probably Wally knows what that is. But the mounts are totally collapsed, and the engine was really sitting on the cross member. Yeah. What I found out, your oil fill, you got your cross brace up in the engine. When you put the new motor mounts on, that motor sits a good half-inch higher. And another way that I've noticed, if it looks like you have bad motor mounts, the motor's actually sitting fairly low in relation to the cross strut. So when these mounts go, I will tell you, you can really notice it.
Is it age or wear on the mount? What's the back when it's rubber hose?
what I've been looking at. When he was pointing to the motor mounts, I actually see a little bit of an external head gasket. You can see evidence of a little bit of antifreeze up there. It looks like a little dried up green, kind of fuzzy looking almost. And that's a sign that antifreeze has been seeping out between the cylinder head and the engine block itself. And I was also looking up here. You can see the same thing, but on the heater control valve. So, yeah,
That just means that somebody didn't install it very well.
it actually looks like it's coming out of the seal of the valve itself. Okay. So the valve looks like this guy. Okay. Now I look up here and I can also see some valve cover gasket leaks.
They don't leak near as bad as 911s.
Which is nothing really to be worried about, excessive as far as the track inspection goes. When I forget the Q2.
Is seepage pretty normal though, in general?
Seepage, it can be, yes, especially with the portion. But excessive, this is not. This is not anywhere near excessive. I've seen tons worse than this. But actually, this head gasket over here is worse than the other side. And more than likely, that's going to need to be addressed. These steering shafts, these rubber bushings up here, when they get oil soaked like this, you really need to check them. Because the oil will deteriorate that rubber. Those bushings will go bad.
Does that feel pretty tight?
That one feels good, yes. But it is oil soaked, so it would be wise to spray it with brake clean and get that oil cleaned up off of there with brake clean. And the actual thing would be to address the oil leak that's leaking oil on it.
I just tested, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it looks like that valve cover gasket or the cam plug in back of the engine. One of the two is leaking on that.
I just tested, just for grins here, this ball pan screw here, the bolt, and it's, I'm going to give it to you. I'm taking it off just by my hands here. It needs to be...
Put it back.
Okay, I'm putting it back. Here, you can have it. No, I'll put it back. But obviously, this is very common. Over time, they all get finger loose. They may actually fall out. So, whenever you change your oil, check the ones that you can see right away, obviously. There are some that are pretty hard to get to, but at least the ones you can easily get your hand on, just try to do what I just did. And if they are that loose, then be clued that you need to, take care of that at some point. Don't try to torque them down. That's the worst thing you can do. You're gonna foul off the way the seal around the gasket around the pan is, and you're just gonna wind up with a bigger leak than you'd ever thought possible. So make sure you follow the instructions in the book, tighten it down to no more than what it says. I think it's 8 Newton meters or something like that. Not much.
Use a torque wrench and just
Really, I mean, you better use a torque wrench. Don't use your hand saying, oh, that's about right, because that more than likely was too much.
Okay. And to continue with the tech inspection, pretty much, you just you want to check all bearings and joints. Everything rubber. These bushings right here are fairly common going bad. Sway bar links, ball joints, which we pretty much already checked when we shook the car down. Bushings here.
this one looks like it actually has been moved.
You check this, the motor is up here. No, this one's good. What we're looking now is this. As you should know, you have a double wishbone suspension here with unequal arm A-arms. Actually, you have your lower control arm and an unequal length A-arm on the top, but they both have what do you call it? Ball joints. Now, the weight of the car is supported by the lower ball joint. The upper ball joint is not supporting the weight of the car, but it is the one that fails the most often. The boot eventually breaks on that. And if the boot tears and you caught it in time, the replacement is clean the joint, inspect the joint, clean the joint.